All right, I hope everybody is ready because we are. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good very morning for people in Australia at 4 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. We've seen a couple of them. Good evening, depending on where you guys are from. We can see that you're coming from all over the world. That's pretty exciting. So welcome to our 4D webinar series. This is our second webinar here, and this second part of our introduction to v13. So for those of you who missed the first part, you can actually watch the recorded version online. So you check our 4D.com website for that. My name is Michel Guerin, and I'll be the host of today's webinar. On the agenda today, so we will start with a quick 2 minutes introduction, then we'll go over some more of the new v13 features. We will follow with a 40-minute presentation with product demo. Then we'll wrap up the session with some pointers to additional references. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session, about 10 minutes we're looking at. Note, to enter your questions, you'll have to type them in the chat window. That's provided by WebEx. So feel free to add your comments and your questions during the presentation, and we'll try our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. This time we've added the list of participants so that you can see the participants. We had some interesting feedback in the previous webinar. Most of the people thought they were just the only one. So no, we're reassuring you. There was more than 300 of you in the last webinar. This webinar, we had over 450 registrations, and we'll see how many of you are going to make it. So our speakers today are, again, Josh Fletcher, Technical Account Manager. Hi, Josh.
Hello.
And Ad Kay, Director of Technical Services. Hi, Ad.
Hi, Michel.
So without further ado, let me give the mic to Josh so he can tell us more about v13.
Thank you, Michel. Good morning. Well, good morning for me. Welcome, everybody. We just cut it down to welcome, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for our continuing series on exploring the new features in 4D v13. So what we are trying to continue to show you guys with this webinar series is that we are still definitely invested in 4D, and v13 represents another major upgrade to the product line. And just a reminder, in case you didn't know, v13 is now available, so head on over to 4D.com or the store. Oh, yeah, v13.
Yeah.
You can buy it in the store. You can call your sales reps, whatever however you'd like to go about getting it. So be sure and so the things you see today, you don't have to wait to try them out. You'll be able to check them out. All right. So if you joined us last time, I gave you this sort of overview of the major feature themes in v13. We covered the source toolkit, listbox features, and the new web server last time. If you missed it, I've got a link down there at the bottom of this slide. That's to part 1. So feel free to write that down and save it for later. We posted the whole webinar online so you can go and watch it. I'll leave that up as I go through here. So just to give you an overview, if you weren't with us last time, a quick idea of the things that we talked about. The listbox features in v13 were tremendously enhanced. So we doubled the number of listbox commands. We added a lot of new features like the ability to have footers based on formulas, to be able to have control over when the user enters cells and things like that. The new web server, of course, is a huge evolution for 4D as a product. It's modernized, it's scalable, it has preemptive multitasking, and so that was a big piece of the v13 release. The last one we talked about was the Source Toolkit. Source Toolkit is an API, an integrated API in 4D that allows you read and write access to all of your methods and also method attributes and method comments. And so it's a really powerful feature for both doing introspection as well as version control integration as well. So that's what we covered in the first webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the 3 that I have highlighted now in red. The super web area is the next thing I'm going to talk about, so I'm not going to do any kind of detail here. We're also going to look at some database engine features. So in every release of 4D, I mean, the database engine is the core, and so we don't want to ignore that. So you'll have some powerful new features of the database engine that we'll show you today. And then finally, the language Fiesta. We've made a huge investment in productivity features in v13. And so we're going to spend some time showing you a lot of these kind of maybe smaller features, but they really make 4D easier to use and make using 4D fun. They make your lives easier. So that's what we'll cover today. The last 2 on the list here, 4D in the cloud and 4D under the hood, is just some information that we'll probably try to cover in a future webinar or some other content. Certainly cloud deployment is a very popular topic these days. And so we would like to convey that 4D has been ready for cloud deployment in the past, and it's even better in a better position now with v13 because mainly with the new web server we have much better scalability and the ability to use 4D remote as a web server gives you the elasticity. You can add and remove remote instances as needed if you have a kind of a load balancing situation. So that's pretty neat. And then as far as the under the hood stuff goes, that's just about the changes that we have to make so that 4D continues to enjoy the tremendous longevity that it's had. My go-to example there has been talking about Carbon. So Carbon is a programming API from Apple that they have basically deprecated. They're not going to migrate it to 64-bit. So we have to remove all references to Carbon from 4D. It's an ongoing project. It started with version 11, and it's going to take some time to get rid of all of it. And so the new web server is an example of how we can do that. And the new web server is new code. It's clean code. It doesn't have any of those old references to Carbon and things like that. So that's an ongoing project for us, and yeah, so that's that. Okay. If you didn't get a chance to get the URL to part 1, I'll post it up at the end here too when we're done. So the first feature we're going to talk about today is the web area. Now, we're calling it Super Web Area in v13 for a couple of reasons, and this section here is going to kind of be split up into 2 parts. First, we're going to show you some of the things that you can do with the web area, maybe that you might not have thought of, and then also talk about the specific changes that we've made in v13. So if you're not familiar with the web area at all, I'll give you an idea of some of the things that you can do and some of the ideas that are more common. So first of all, the web area is the simplest way to define the web area is it gives you the ability to embed a web browser in a 4D form. But that's actually kind of a limiting definition. It actually goes beyond being a web browser, and so that's kind of what we want to give you some ideas about today. The most common example of web area usage that we've presented in the past is something called a mashup. So a mashup just means you take existing web content and you display it inside 4D. So for example, I've got this simple interface here where I can type in an address, and what I do is I go off and I fetch a Google map for that address. So I'm taking content from Google, displaying it on a 4D form. That's a classic example. Sorry, I skipped one part. Taking content from Google, integrating some data that I entered in 4D, and then displaying it in a 4D form. So that's kind of a classic example of a mashup. Of course, this Google page has a lot of extra junk on it that I may not want, so that gives you an idea of how a mashup can be neat, but it can also be kind of limiting depending on the content that you're pulling in. So the next thing that you can do with the web area is something called injection. So this screenshot that you see here is an application that I built for a Techno called 4D Credentials Manager. And I have there in a drop-down list some websites. In this example, I'll select Gmail. I go off and I load the Gmail login page or the home page up in my web area. And then clicking the Fill It button, I actually take my saved credentials that I saved in 4D and I inject them into the page. In other words, you have programmatic control over the contents of the web area, and you can actually modify it on the fly. You can inject values, you can hide things, you can show things, you have complete control. So mashups and injection are 2/3 of the picture of what you can do with the web area. The one that we wanted to talk about today is the third one that I think in some cases a lot of people don't really think about, and that's really using the web area as a form object and not a web browser. The idea being you've got a 4D interface already. Perhaps you can improve that interface, you can augment that interface by embedding a web area and leveraging some of the rich internet technologies that are out there. So rich internet technologies, I'm talking about things like JavaScript, HTML5, CSS3. You've got this existing sort of infrastructure for all these web applications that are starting to provide a rich interface. The advantage of doing it with web area is the web area is a fully integrated form object. It's part of 4D, it has form events, so you have control inside your application to get it to do what you want. And the last point about this is that you've got all of these external frameworks, these popular external JavaScript frameworks and HTML frameworks that have already been implemented. So you can leverage that technology and get it into 4D. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, there's a fact here, which is your users are probably getting an increased level of expectation for user interface because they're using this technology every day on their smartphones, on their tablets. They're already seeing these rich web interfaces. And so you can leverage that in 4D. You can use that technology inside your 4D forms and augment the existing interface that you have. Now there's one point that I want to be really clear about here before we take a look at an example. I said earlier you can define the web area as a web browser in 4D, which really isn't accurate. The fact is, excuse me, in this context, I'm not talking about making a network request. I'm not talking about going to any website and getting website content. You can have, for example, a copy of the jQuery library on your local machine, sitting in JavaScript files on your local machine, and load them up off the disk. You can even load them up at runtime by directly manipulating the content of the web area. In other words, the web area doesn't have to talk to a web server at all. And so that's really what we're talking about today. It's really neat that you can do this kind of thing and just sort of integrate it with 4D. So before I talk about the specific v13 changes, we're going to look at some examples here with add.
All right. Okay. So just to show you what Josh was talking about here, we have this wonderful example that we put together utilizing the web area in 4D interface. Now, if you take a look at this interface, you can't really tell exactly where the web area starts and when the actual 4D object starts. So on the left side of the screen here, this area that you're seeing here listing all the continents are actually a web area displaying the list of continents. You have the live expandable continent displaying all of the countries. Now, on the right side here, this is also the web area starting displaying all the countries in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you some cool thing that you can do within your own application. I can click on one of the countries within the web area, and I can grab the information from within the database and populate it not only to another web area, but also I was able to populate the list of the city within the list box, which is the native object of 4D. So this is something that was really cool that you can do it yourself, and it is possible to do so in 4D v13. Now let me show you another example that's utilizing the same idea. Here is a really cool example. You've probably seen something like this in some other application out there, maybe on iTunes. This is a cover flow interface. I use some of the native data within 4D. This is, again, to reiterate what Josh was saying. There's no network connection. There's no calling to an external web server or web services. I'm pulling all of the information directly from the local database. Now I can keep scrolling, and this is the live data pulling from within the local database. So as you can see, it makes things really presentable, and you can utilize the way it, most people will view this type of interface in some other object and application. Okay? Back to you, Josh.
So just a couple of examples there of, as Ad said, no web requests. We're just leveraging the web technology to build kind of a richer interface in 4D. All right, so that now, just to be clear, the stuff that we just showed you is achievable in version 11 and version 12. We did make some specific changes in v13. That's the next thing that I want to talk about here. So what we're offering in v13 is something we're calling the integrated WebKit. So before I talk about what WebKit is, I'll talk about the way the web area works in previous versions, well, and still in v13. So in 40v11 SQL and 40v12, the web area, the code or the API behind the web area is based on the browser of the operating system. So if you've got a database running on Windows, the web area is an ActiveX control, which is based on Internet Explorer. If you're running on Mac, the web area is based on Safari. So this is good in some ways because it means that the web area is consistent with the browser on the OS. But at the same time, if you've spent any time doing web development, you've probably been through the pain of developing an interface for one browser and then having to tweak it endlessly to get it to work on all the other browsers. And another challenge is what happens when the user decides to update the browser. So they move from Internet Explorer 8 to Internet Explorer 9, and you don't know that they've done that. Of course, that can cause things to break. So what happens is you have a bit of an unstable environment that you don't have control over as a developer unless you're directly in control of that person's machine. So what we're doing in v13 is we are integrating WebKit. Now WebKit, if you don't know what it is, it's an open source web engine. It's used, in fact, as the foundation of Google Chrome, for example, and also Apple Safari. By integrating into 4D, we are addressing three basic concerns. The first concern is consistency. What I mean by that is 4D is a cross-platform product. We support Mac and Windows, and like I just said, if you've done any web development, when you try to develop for more than one platform, it can often be kind of a pain. So WebKit is is also a cross-platform piece of software. By offering the integrated WebKit, we're going to give you the same behavior, the same rendering, the same consistent interface on both platforms. So that's the first piece. The next issue we're addressing with the integrated WebKit is reliability. So getting back to the issue of worrying about whether the user might update the browser and things like that, things that might potentially break your interface. With the integrated WebKit, you are in control as the developer. You don't have to worry about operating system updates and things like that. You only update it whenever you want, or with a new version of 4D and what have you. So just as a small side note, and I know this question's been asked before, about how we plan to update WebKit in 4D. The current plan is to only update it with major releases. It's a conservative plan. Of course, if there's significant security problems and things like that, we would update it with a point release, but that's the current plan right now. We're relying on you guys to some extent for feedback. If the update schedule isn't working for you, definitely let us know and we'll figure out something that works better. The last concern that we're addressing here with integrated WebKit is, of course, to do what 4D always does, which is make it easy. If you want to use the integrated WebKit, open up the properties for your web area and click a checkbox. And that's all you have to do to use this. So I'll show you an example of why this is important. Now this particular demonstration I'm just going to do with slides because it requires more than one computer. It doesn't really flow very well with WebEx. So, but it'll give you an idea. So going back to the cover flow demo that Ad just showed you, here's a screenshot of that application on macOS. It looks nice. We've got the transparency behind the pictures. We've got the mirror effect and a pretty clean looking scroll bar. The next thing is I'll show you is a screenshot of the same application but opened on Windows. It doesn't look very nice at all, does it? And I'm not talking about the picture, Michelle.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the transparency is missing. The pictures are too big to fit in the display. There's a weird scroll bar on the right-hand side that doesn't have a thing, a scroll that you can grab. The scroll bar on the bottom is actually shifted over. It basically looks terrible. And so this is the pain of web development that I was talking about. As a web developer, if you're developing for more than one browser, you basically have to build multiple interfaces so that it actually works in each browser. And that's kind of silly. So here's a side-by-side of Mac and Windows just so you can see just how bad it looks on Windows at this point. So how do we fix it? Well, that's the best part. As I said before, open up the properties for the web area, click a checkbox. Here is a screenshot of the same application, now running on Windows with the integrated WebKit. Michelle likes this one much better. And just to show you side-by-side comparison, you've got Windows on the left and Mac OS on the right. It's just about exactly the same. It's off by a pixel or two here and there, but the fact is this is the exact same web interface, the exact same code. The only difference is we switched it to use the integrated web area. There's been no browser-specific tweaking or anything like that. So we get a much more consistent display by using the integrated WebKit. Okay, so the super web area in v13, the whole goal here is to give you something that's rich, reliable, and consistent across platforms, and also sounds like the ideal woman for Ad. All right. So that's the first feature area we're going to talk about today. The next thing we're going to talk about is the database engine. As I mentioned before, so we showed you kind of a flashy visual feature for the first section here, but we want to show you that we did do some work behind the scenes too. We did some new features in the core of 4D. So the first one that I want to talk about is you have the ability in v13 to add an index to a picture field. So here are some properties for a picture field. And down there under the indexing section, notice that there's a checkbox available. It says keyword index. Now, you might be going, why would you want to add an index to a picture field? And really, this isn't about pictures, but in fact about picture metadata. So the idea is most of the photo formats today support text data embedded in the photo. And in particular in v13, we are supporting the IPTC keywords. So all this means is you can have text embedded inside the photo. You can have, for example, maybe the location that the photo was taken, the type of camera that was used, even the photo settings like f-stop and things like that. That's all the kind of metadata that a camera might actually insert into the photo. But in fact, you're not limited just to that data coming from the camera. You can add your own data. So you can add in, for example, I'll just give you an example of a query that you might use. Let's say we have a database with apartment listings, and you've embedded the location of the apartment in the photos. So here I can query the apartment table for photo contains south. The key thing here is to use the contains keyword operator. This is a keyword index. So that's the % sign that you see there in the example. So it's a simple feature. Ad built something really cool with it, so I'm going to have him show you that right now.
All right, here we are, going back to the demos that you just saw earlier. So all of this information actually coming from a table with one single field, a picture field in it. Within the
no, we did. It's just slow.
Okay. All right. Just there's some lagging going on, so I apologize. So just going back to where I was referring to, all of this information coming from a table with one single field, which is a picture field. We have the option, the index option turned on for the keywords. Now, we put together a little filtering mechanism to allow us to do a search within the keywords of the pictures. So at the top here, as you can see, we have all genders showing right now. So if I'm doing a search for male, I'm basically doing a search for the keywords within the metadata. I can now display all male photos. I can make changes to female, the same thing, same effect. I can do multiple search criteria. Let's choose happy, perhaps smile.
What about rich?
Rich? Yeah, that's the one that I don't have, but let's try hair color. Brown, make it obvious, blonde. How about that? So now you can see that you can build something like this with the data that you may already have added from inside within the picture directly. So again, the keyword is part of the picture metadata. So whether you already have it within the picture or outside of 4D, or you can do it inside of 4D as well. All right, back to Josh.
Thanks, Ed. And just so everybody knows, we had the interns enter all that data into the pictures. Okay, so that's the first example of a feature we added in v13 with regards to database engine. The next one that I want to talk about is something we're calling the document store. So on the left, you have the field properties for a blob field in v12. And down there under map null values to blank values, you see there's a blank spot. Now here at 4D, we don't like blank spots in the UI, so we're giving you a new feature to fill that in. So same properties on the right in v13, and notice there's an option there that's labeled stored. So the idea with the document store feature is you have optional control over where the data is stored. Now, just to be clear, in v11 and v12, you have the option to store data in the record or outside the record. The new thing that we're adding is actually probably somewhat familiar to you if you've been using 4D for any amount of time. You may have in the past built an interface where you have a second table to store large objects. And the reason why you do that, generally, is for performance. So for example, if you're going to do a sequential query on a table with blobs of pictures or large text, 4D has to load each record and do that query. It takes, the bigger the record is, the longer it takes. So if you can store that large object outside the record, then it makes things like sequential queries faster. We're taking it one step further in v13 by giving you the option to store the large objects outside the data file. Now, why would you want to do this? So here's just a simple example. Let's say we have a database and it contains pictures. And in fact, it contains a lot of pictures. In this particular example, we're going to say the data file has 4 gigabytes of pictures. What happens if we can instead store those pictures outside the data file? The first improvement I already mentioned, which is you get an improvement in sequential query speed because 4D doesn't have to go and load those large objects into the cache when you're doing a query. You also get that improvement without all the overhead of doing a separate table and doing relations and managing the relations and all that kind of thing. So in that sense, it's kind of free. The second thing is we make the data file significantly smaller. This is going to improve any kind of maintenance, for example. Doing a compact, doing a repair, all that's going to be faster because the data file is significantly smaller. Your backup might even be faster depending on whether or not you want to back up the external data using 4D backup or using something else. The third thing is probably is really the foundation of why we made this change in v13 to be able to store the files externally. What if, for example, you want to open a file up and edit it? In a traditional 4D system, you'd have to write some code to export the file out of the database, make the change, and then import it back into the database. If you're using the document store feature, the files are already outside the database. You can open them up in Photoshop and make a change. Or, for example, maybe you want to serve the files, maybe you're using them as images on a website. With the v13 web server, we've mentioned before, we mentioned in the first class, it's really important to try to use static content whenever possible because v13 can serve this static content preemptively. So again, if the files are located outside the database, you can store them, you can serve them using the new web server. And one last thing to think about is, well, I'll come to that in a second. So that's the concept. Now I'll give you some of the more kind of gritty details. The fact is, since the files are outside the data file, we have to be able to find them. We have to use the file system. And so we need a path to those files. And you have two different options as far as the external data path goes. The first is built-in free and automatic. With the automatic feature, 4D creates a folder hierarchy to store the files. There's a folder for the table name, there's a folder with the field name, and then there's subfolders for the actual pictures. They're broken up into subfolders for optimization reasons. You don't want to have 5 million pictures in one folder because it makes the file system really slow. So we automatically break it up. And the picture names themselves are UUIDs. So that's the automatic feature. Now, you have the option of doing custom path handling. With custom path handling, that puts you in complete control. You can put the pictures wherever you want. You can name them whatever you want. So there's something, the last thing that I was just going to mention a minute ago that's really neat about the custom path handling is just stop and think for a second about that. The only limitation is file system limitations. So what I mean is, for example, you could have pictures across multiple network locations on different hard drives, wherever you want them. So they don't have any tie to the data file at all. That's pretty cool. The last little bit here is you need some commands in order to be able to use this new feature. The first two are fairly obvious. Get external data path and set external data path just gives you control over the path to that particular piece of data. Now, I know I've mentioned pictures a lot. I just want to reiterate, this is not limited to pictures. It can be used for pictures, blogs, or text. The last one there, reload external data. Now this is a situation where we had to be a little bit pragmatic. What this means is, if you change one of those objects on the disk outside the scope of 4D, you need to let 4D know that you changed it. Now, why didn't we just make it automatic? Think about a situation where you have 4 gigabytes of pictures on the drive. If 4D is constantly scanning those files, trying to see if they've been changed or not, that would be really inefficient. So we erred on the side of efficiency here, and we give you a command to notify 4D when things have been changed. And if you think about it, I mean, how often does a picture really change? This kind of data is probably going to be somewhat static. If this is data that gets changed all the time, then you should probably leave it in the data file, and then you don't have to worry about it. So that's a summary of the feature. Ad is going to show you an example of the feature.
All right, so we are back to the photo stock demo again. So I want to show you the feature that Josh was just talking about. One thing that I did not mention earlier was that I have the option to save all of these pictures on the disk for this particular field in a table. So I can do, I can go ahead and make modification directly to the disk file. So I put together a really simple feature here. So if I'm clicking on this picture, I can get into the detail mode where I can click on edit. And what it's doing here is actually loading the picture directly into a Photoshop. Now, you know, I'm going to show you a little bit of my artistic skills here. Looks like this lady might need some highlights, maybe like here, down there, maybe on the left here also. So that's just something that's, you know, I learned from school.
Ladies, take note.
So I'm just going to go ahead and make a picture. I'll save this picture. There we go. Save now. If I'm going back to 4D, you can see that it's immediately applied the change into the database. Now I can go back and continue to browse through all the pictures without any problem. So this process makes everything seem seamless to the user and making it really efficient. Okay, back to you, Josh.
Thanks, Ed.
All right.
So the last feature that I want to talk about in the context of the database engine is two new features we've added with regards to database maintenance. So in this case, I'm talking about the Maintenance and Security Center, the MSC. So if you pull the MSC up in v13 and go to the Compact tab and then click on the Advanced button, you'll see two new checkboxes that I'll highlight here. The first one, force updating of records. So again, if you've been using 4D for any long amount of time, you're probably aware of the fact that in 4D, if you change the type of a field, for example, nothing happens to the existing data by default. And if you want to change the data in the records, you have to load the new data type isn't applied until you load the record, and the change doesn't persist unless you save the record. And so you might be used to doing something, for example, like doing apply to selection on all the tables in the database to, you know, to update to the new field type, that kind of thing. This feature, if you're not familiar with it, it gives you some neat advantages. I'm talking about the ability to change a field type in 4D. You can change a field type in 4D, and if you haven't touched the data, you can switch it back, for example. So it's kind of nice. However, at some point in time, you probably have to loop over all the records, resave them to make those changes stick. So in fact, we're giving you the ability to do that in v13 by just clicking a checkbox. So if you turn on the force updating of the records and do a compact, 4D will automatically go through and resave them all for you. The second one there, compact address table, is maybe a little more esoteric. Basically what it boils down to is, right now in 4D, if you delete a record, we preserve an entry in the address table so that we can have consistent record numbers that don't change. And that was based on some customer requirements. That's why it's implemented that way currently. Where this comes into play is if you delete a lot of records, and by a lot of records I mean, let's say you have a table with 10 million records and you delete 80 to 90% of them. That'll actually have an effect on performance because the address table doesn't shrink. So there's still 10 million entries in the address table, and so when you go to do something like an all records or a sequential search, 4D has to scan through that address table. So if you don't care about record numbers, reusing record numbers, and you want to maybe pick up a little bit of performance or maybe reclaim the lost space to that really big address table, click this compact address table checkbox and do a compact, and 4D will compact it for you, and takes care of it for you. So that's it for database engine features. Hopefully it gives you an idea that we're just trying to continue to give you powerful features that give you more control over the data in your database. So we have one more section left for today, and that's the language Fiesta. So without further ado, sorry.
Oh, Josh.
Michelle's trying to pretend that he's not dancing right now. All right, back to reality. Hopefully that woke everybody up. So, Language Fiesta may seem like kind of a silly name for a feature, and it's not really one feature. It's in fact a whole bunch of different features. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that these are all pretty much productivity features, but productivity is very boring. So we were trying to come up with a name to catch all these things together in one category, and you could do kitchen sink, you could do everything else, and all of it was kind of boring. So Language Fiesta is what we came up with, and the idea is that there's so much going on with productivity features in 4D, it's like a party. And the goal is to make you guys happy and to make you enjoy working with 4D. So I'll give you one example. The selection to array command has been enhanced in v13. You know how we enhance a command? We add the star parameter. Very important. So what this allows you to do is use selection to array kind of like the way you do query. In other words, so you can write generic code. So here's a simple example of a for loop. I'm looping over pointers to fields and arrays, calling selection to array until I run out of pointers. And then at the very end, when the for loop is done, I call selection to array one more time, and 4D goes off and executes it. Now, there's one other advantage to this that may be a little bit more subtle, and that's the fact that in 4D, there's a limit on the number of parameters you can pass to a command. It's 128. When you use selection to array in this fashion, there's no limitation. You can pass thousands of parameters if you want, if you're crazy. So that's just one example of something from the Language Fiesta. I'll give you a few more here. All of the file management commands have been enhanced, or not all of them, but a lot of them. For example, the create folder command will create every folder. So if you're creating a folder and some of the parent folders in the past don't exist, 4D will create all those for you automatically. So you don't have to loop through and create each folder manually anymore. Another example is the copy document command now works with folders. So you can copy the entire contents of a folder using one 4D command. You don't have to use a loop or launch external process or something like that. The document list command has several new options. You can, for example, get the absolute paths of every file returned by document list. That would be the system paths there. You can also get the POSIX paths if you want. You can ignore invisible files. And the last one there is really cool. You can do recursive parsing. In other words, you can call document list on a folder, and it will give you the paths to all of the files and all of the subfolders as well. Last one on the file management list here is the select document command. There's a new option for that command called file name entry. The idea with this is you show the user the standard file open dialog, but they can enter a file name. After they're done entering the file name, nothing really happens automatically. You're in control. You get the file name back. You can create a file for them. You can open a file for them, whatever you want to do. So it just gives you an extra layer of control over what's going on with the select document command. Some more. You want more, Michelle?
Sure.
Of course, more getters and setters. Yeah, Michelle wants more coffee. We're always trying to give you more getters and setters to give you more programmatic control over different features in 4D. We have integrated support for the Hunspell spell checking engine. This is an open source spell checker. It's published on OpenOffice.org's website. The primary benefit for you guys as developers to using Hunspell is you can get dictionaries from OpenOffice's website. So they're already out there in a whole bunch of different languages. You don't have to build your own up. You can just download them and install them into 4D. We have support for Gone, I should say. Gone is the proprietary 4D Windows Print Preview dialog. We now have support for native Windows Print Preview.
Yay!
So we just use the built-in XPS viewer on Windows now. It's much faster, and it does what users are used to from other programs. Oh yes, finally. You can define custom 4D constants using something other than a plugin. So now you can define constants using XLIF files in v13. Want some more?
There's more?
There's more. The open data file command can be used on 4D server, so you can actually switch the data file on the server on the fly. This one is really cool for you guys that are deploying to multiple customers. The idea with this, the preferences in v13 is they can be stored in an external file. So you can have per customer preferences, and also it makes database updates easier. You can preserve that preferences file, install a new version of 4D, and they keep all their settings. So maybe things like cache size and stuff like that, you can have it per customer. Makes it much easier to manage the deployment. The last one I'm going to talk about is a new style sheet option called Automatic. So there's an example here on your right-hand side of two checkboxes. Now there's a small difference, and I apologize if it's really too small, but you may notice that the checkbox on the right is a little bit smaller than the checkbox on the left, but the font size is basically the same, and the font size for the one on the right is perhaps a little bit too tall. The idea with the automatic style sheet option is 4D is actually going to ask the OS, how big should the font be for this object? So with that turned on, the smaller checkbox also gets a smaller font. No code changes. You don't have to define different style sheets for Mac and Windows or anything like that. It just does it automatically for you. That's the way we like to do it in 4D.
Impressive.
Okay, so that's the last language Fiesta features that I'm going to talk about. Ad's actually going to show you even more. So he's not going to show you the ones I just talked about, but he's going to show you even more language Fiesta features.
Okay, so now we are in a new demo now. I'm going to show you some of the stuff that actually has been a buzz recently. There's a new command called text-to-array that we have added, which is going to make your life a lot easier as far as how to break up each line of text based on the width pixels. So we put together a simple demos here. On the top is a text area. At the bottom here, this is a list box. We have the array assigned to it. It's already been broken into each line and each element. So we have a vertical bar with a slider that we have added here to make it a little bit more clear for you to see. As I'm scrolling to the left, you can see that everything gets adjusted correctly as far as the width of the text concerned. And if you make any changes to the font size, let me go back to make it obvious here. It also apply the same rule to it too. The text-to-array not only apply the rules based on the width, it also take the size of the font and the font itself into account. Now let's take a look at another demo here. Let's just say this is something that we've added to make your life easier. Same concept again. In the past, we've done this before, but we have to kind of write our own code to do it. So we have this text. If we want to break them up into keywords, now we have a new command called getTextKeywords. This command is really easy to use. All you do is just pass in the text input, and then you get the results back in array. Now on the right side here, you can see there's all the keywords has been broken up, but still, you're still seeing a bunch of duplicate keywords with the enhanced feature, pre-enhanced feature of v13 with the star parameter at the end. You can get the distinct keywords this way. really easy, really simple to use.
Lagging. Sorry guys, it's lagging a little bit.
Oh, is it lagging?
There we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for some of you that are catching up, so that's what's going on. The second option, the last option, which is the star, allow you to get the distinct keywords. Now I'm going to switch to the next demo here. Oops, not her.
Take note, ladies.
Now here we go. I'm sure many of you have played this game before. They're comparing the pictures side by side, but this is not about building a game within 4D. What I want to show to you to make it obvious, visually, some of you may detect the differences between the two pictures. What we have added into 4D is the ability to do comparison between two pictures. So let me show you what the command looks like. That command's name is equal picture. What it does is allow you to get the mask that is difference between the two pictures, and the result of it is this. So as you can see, it's actually on the right side here, I'm showing the differences between the two pictures. We have something that's missing here. There's a little red box here. There's a person down here. But that's visually that you can see as far as the comparison is concerned. Now, what about looking at something like this? The two pictures are pretty hard to, you can almost, virtually you can't see the differences because, they are, to me, it's identical. But again, we have added a new command that allows you to get the actual differences of the picture, to detect the differences of the picture. That command is generate digest. Now what it does is it allows me to get the MD5 digest of each picture, and those are the digests that's generated from the command. You can see that there are differences, and a lot of time, you want to do a quick comparison between two pictures. Comparing the size of the pictures is not enough. Allowing the digest to be generated and compare the digest is the option now in v13. Now, but what is really the difference between the two pictures? Let me show you. There you go. On the right side of the picture, we have the mask with the word kids behind it. So that's what it is.
Cool.
So Michelle wanted to know like what would be a real example of this. So the Justin Bieber fan club isn't the real example, but for example, let's say you're doing medical imaging and you want to detect has somebody manipulated a picture. Generate digest is a really quick and easy way to do that. You just generate a digest for the pictures and see if they're really the same or whatever. So.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ad.
Thanks.
All right. So I'll take us to our wrap-up slide here.
Because we're kind of running out of time. So is it my turn to talk now?
So the language Fiesta is too much fun.
All right, excellent. Thank you, guys.
So today we talked about web area, database engine, and language Fiesta. Just remember, that's not all there is with v13. v13 is out, so definitely please be sure to go check it out. And I'll let Michelle take over because he would like to.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh and Ad, for this great second introduction to v13. I can't wait to put my hand on it. I want to also thank actually Bill McKay. I mean, we don't hear him, but he's here on the chat room, helping you guys out, answering questions during the entire webinar. So thank you, Bill.
No problem.
All right, we heard his voice. So a few updates before we go to the Q&A. Well, first and biggest update of 4D v13 is available. Make sure to look at it, download it, and try it. The second is we have a developer conference from 4D going on in Australia pretty soon on March 7th and 8th. So that's a great way for us here to go toward the summer and put again our summer clothes if we want to go there, and to learn more about v13 in more in depth about their features. And actually, get a free box of chocolates from what I heard, right? Pretty cool. There's also, for those who don't want to leave the country and who are here in the U.S., if you're around Seattle, at the end of this month, around February 25th, there's going to be a code camp all dedicated to 4D, and where we'll talk about v13, and actually Josh is going to go do some presentation about v13 over there. All right, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Regarding feedback, you're more than welcome to give us feedback all the time on how good of a job we do. So shoot us an email at marketing@4d.com. And if you want to have a look at the part 1 of the 4D v13 introduction, I want to remind everybody that it's available online.
One person
recorded version
pointed out in the questions here that the link didn't work, so I'll double check that when we're done here. I think it works okay, but we'll check and see.
All right, so the only thing I want to add also that we're going to send you a survey in a couple of days. Please help us by answering questions. It helps us here find out what kind of other webinars you'd like, and any kind of other feedback that we'd like to have here. So this is it for today's presentation. We're going to take a minute to go over the questions that you guys sent. You guys are ready?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Couple of reminders. First of all, there's a bunch of questions. We won't be able to get to them all today, but we will answer them, and we will send you the answers to all of them. So don't worry about it if you don't hear your question while we're here. Also, we were recording the session, so we will post it online so you can watch it again. Okay, so a couple of questions here about document store. One of them, so first of all, just a reminder, I was mentioning pictures a lot. It does work for blobs and text. Someone asked, will it work for 4D Write? I mean, the fact is it doesn't matter what the blob is. It can be any kind of a blob. There was a question about, is it possible to know if the file outside the database has been modified? So it's kind of, I suppose you could use the digest.
Well, there's the command. Are you looking for the path?
No, a different one. The fact is, it's kind of the opposite, meaning if the file gets modified, you can notify 4D that it's been modified. That's the reload external data command. If you need to detect that the file has been modified, the generate digest would be a great way to do that. Let's see. If you use the automatic option for document store, is there a command to find the path in the file? And yeah, definitely. So we showed those in the slide. The get external data path is what you would use there. There's a question, using the force updating of records feature, does this cause the table trigger to fire? No, it's not about, if you think about it, it's not really modifying values, it's just converting values that are already there, so there won't be any triggers or anything like that.
Yeah. Can generate a digest, create an MD5 value for any type of field. Right now, the digest is actually worked on a blob content, so anything that you can convert into a blob, it can be generated with the digest command.
There's one question about file management commands. Is there any way to get a hash of the file and disk so you can do a compare? It's kind of like same thing as what Ad just said. As long as you can convert it to a blob, you can use generate digest and do comparisons that way. So it actually works quite well for that. When will the v13 trial be available? As far as I know, it's already available. We had a customer call yesterday who was using it. So, you know, the v13 trial is available.
It should be available.
Okay. All right. Let's see, what else do we have? There's one question about, is it possible to display PDFs within 4D? It's not really, what am I trying to say?
Well, on the Windows, the web area will automatically, first we'll use whatever the plugin that you have installed to your browser, which is the PDF reader. On the Mac, it will, first, if there is no PDF reader plugin installed, it will use the preview, which is part of the Mac OS. to display within the web area.
So web area is basically your best bet for PDF content. Constants. Somebody asked, the audio dropped out for one of the attendees when I was talking about constants. It's really simple. It's based on XLIF. That's really all it boils down to. So you define an XLIF file with your constants, and you get them inside 4D. Someone asked, will the new text keyword support Arabic language? So all of the text processing, text comparison, keyword handling in 4D is based on ICU, which is a open source Unicode framework. So anything that ICU supports, 4D will support. I don't know for a fact that Arabic keyword support is in ICU, but I actually think it probably is. So if you go to our documentation, there will be links to the ICU framework documentation. What I'm getting at is, if you check out the ICU framework documentation, you'll be able to see the different things that they support there. So let's see.
There's a question about pricing.
Yeah.
I've seen how to upgrade. So well, we have so many versions that it depends on the version that you're having. Actually, if it's the standard, the professional expansion, or if it's actually on development on the deployment side. So I advise you to look in the store.
Yeah.
Or talk directly to the sales representative.
I mean, definitely anytime you have a question about pricing, I recommend talking to your sales rep, because no matter what, that's the best point of contact. But also, all of the products are live on the 4D store. Right. So you can see the pricing on store.4d.com for the different upgrades and the different options. And again, don't forget about the maintenance program. Maintenance is really great because you don't have to deal with paying as the new versions come out. You pay your annual maintenance and you get the new version automatically. So that's another thing to look into.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So there are more questions. We will answer them, and we will get answers for them and send you guys all the answers.
All right.
We're going to wrap it up, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us to this webinar. It's really exciting. You were more than 200 people attending it today. So thanks again from all of us here. We're happy that you like what we provide you. And again, give us, some feedback, and we'll improve on what we're providing you with. Again, thanks for your time, and see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.